Very. I'm Rachel.
All those moments will be lost in time, like tears.
Released in 1982, Blade Runner is set in Los Angeles in the year 2019. A city drenched in darkness, endless rain, flickering neon lights and skyscrapers choked in industrial smoke. It's a world where the line between human and machine has all but vanished. In that society, replicants, bioengineered humans begin to rebel, demanding the right to live. Detective Rick Deckard, played by Harrison Ford, is tasked with retiring these rogue replicants. But when he meets Rachel, a replicant who doesn't even know she isn't human, his beliefs, morality, and very sense of self begin to crumble. Is he still truly human? Or just another replicant hunting his own reflection? Behind that haunting philosophical story lies a wealth of dramatic behind-the-scenes tales, from Harrison Ford's deep resentment toward the forced voiceover narration to the now iconic Tears in Rain monologue that Rutger Hauer rewrote only 30 minutes before shooting. Blade Runner endured endless creative clashes between Ridley Scott and the producers, even borrowing unused footage from Stanley Kubrick's The Shining for its final scene. So what turned this box office failure into one of cinema's most celebrated masterpieces? Here are 20 of the strangest and most fascinating facts behind this legendary film. 20. The Tears in Rain monologue was rewritten by Hauer in 30 minutes. The most astonishing fact is that the final version of the Tears in Rain speech wasn't written by the screenwriter, but by Rutger Hauer himself. In David Peoples' original script, Roy Batty's dialogue was lengthy and grandiose, feeling it was too poetic, too theatrical. Hauer trimmed it down the night before shooting, saying he took a knife to it, cutting away the excess and keeping only its purest imagery. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion and sea beams glitter in the dark near the Tannhäuser Gate. After paring down the words, Hauer added one final line that became immortal. All those moments will be lost in time like tears in rain. He wanted Roy Batty in his dying moment to sound not like a machine, but like a man aware of the fragility of life. When he showed the changes to Ridley Scott the next morning, the director simply replied, "All right, let's do it." And in a single take, Hauer delivered one of cinema's most unforgettable monologues. The scene unfolds atop a rain-soaked rooftop moments after Roy saves Deckard from falling. The contrast between that act of mercy and Roy's inhuman nature makes the moment all the more haunting. Years later, when asked about it, Hauer simply said, "I didn't write it as an actor. I wrote it as a man about to die." Do you love this scene? Share your thoughts in the comments below. 19. Gaff's city speak was actually made up of vulgar Hungarian. One of the elements that makes Gaff such a unique character is his strange way of speaking a hybrid language known as city speak. In Ridley Scott's vision of Los Angeles 2019, where people from all over the world have converged into one overcrowded, decaying metropolis, city speak was imagined as the urban lingua franca, born from cultural fusion and social decay. Few fans know that Edward James Olmos himself invented city speak. When he accepted the role, Olmos felt that Gaff needed a distinctive manner of speech to reflect his multicultural background. Unsatisfied with the plain dialogue in the script, he went to the Berlitz Language Center in Los Angeles to study and record words from various languages: Hungarian, Japanese, Spanish, German, French, and even Chinese. He then blended them together, creating what he described as something a man of the future would speak if he had to survive in a borderless world. One of Gaff's famous lines, "Azonnal kövesen engem bitte," mixes Hungarian. "Follow me immediately with German, please." Olmos even threw in some street slang like lofast, a crude Hungarian expletive roughly meaning bullshit. 18. The tense relationship between Scott and the crew. Ridley Scott's relationship with his crew was notoriously strained. After the success of Alien, Scott wanted to reunite his trusted British team, but due to American union rules, he was required to work with a mostly American crew in Los Angeles. The culture clash was immediate. Scott, known for his precision and discipline, often clashed with a crew more accustomed to flexibility. They questioned his lighting methods, his shot compositions, and his insistence on long hours, while Scott grew frustrated with what he saw as a lack of professionalism and respect. The situation exploded after Scott gave an interview to the British press, admitting he preferred working with UK crews because when I ask them to do something they say, "Yes sir," and just get on with it, which isn't always the case with American crews. The comment infuriated the team. Makeup supervisor Marvin G. Westmore led a cheeky rebellion by printing T-shirts for the crew that read on the front, "Yes, Governor, my arse," and on the back, "Will Rogers never met Ridley Scott," a jab at the actor Will Rogers' famous quote, "I never met a man I didn't like." Scott and producer Michael Dealey retaliated with shirts of their own reading, "Xenophobia sucks." Several crew members later recalled that Scott, often kept to himself, communicated only through assistants and rarely explained his creative vision, leaving many feeling dismissed or alienated. Nobody liked the original book. Although Blade Runner is based on Philip K. Dick's 1968 novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, few of the filmmakers were particularly fond of it. Screenwriter Hampton Fancher admitted he wasn't a huge fan of the novel but saw in it a powerful cinematic premise. His early drafts envisioned a small dialogue-driven story centered on human-android relationships. The producers, however, wanted more action and scale leading to creative conflicts. Eventually, David Peoples was brought in to rework the script, balancing Fancher's philosophical tone with greater cinematic dynamism. Tragically, Philip K. Dick never lived to see the film's release. He died in March 1982, just months before Blade Runner premiered. Before his death, he was shown a test reel of the film and expressed surprise and satisfaction at how faithfully Ridley Scott had realised his imagined world. He remarked that the rain-soaked, neon-lit city was exactly the world I saw in my head. Ironically, a film born from a book that its own makers didn't particularly love became Dick's most enduring legacy and a defining cornerstone of cinematic science fiction. 16. Tyrell's death scene cost $20,000. When Roy Batty confronts his creator, Dr. Eldon Tyrell, and begs for more life, their meeting ends in a gruesome yet emotional climax. The crew originally built an incredibly detailed replica of actor Joe Turkel's head, costing around $20,000 for the scene in which Roy crushes Tyrell's skull. However, Ridley Scott and Rutger Hauer decided against using it, finding the prop too stiff and unnatural for close-ups. Instead, the team opted for a simpler, more practical effect. Special effects. Artists ran thin tubes behind Turkel's ears so that when Hauer gripped his head, fake blood would spurt out in sync with his movements. The illusion relied entirely on camera angles, lighting, and the actors' performances, proving that minimal effects could achieve maximum impact. The result remains one of the film's most shocking and memorable moments. 15. The endless debate: is Deckard a replicant? Perhaps the greatest mystery of Blade Runner is whether Rick Deckard himself is a replicant. As a Blade Runner tasked with killing rogue androids, Deckard's moral conflict deepens as clues suggest he may not be human at all. The question has divided audiences and even the filmmakers for decades. Ridley Scott has always maintained that Deckard is a replicant, citing the unicorn dream and the origami unicorn left by Gaff as proof of implanted memories. Harrison Ford, however, firmly believes Deckard is human, arguing that the story loses its emotional weight otherwise. Screenwriter Hampton Fancher agreed, saying that if Deckard were a replicant, the tragedy of the human chasing his own reflection would be lost. Meanwhile, Denis Villeneuve, director of Blade Runner 2049, deliberately kept the answer ambiguous, stating, "I don't know." And I want the audience to keep wondering. Do you think Deckard is human or replicant? Let us know in the comments. The origin of the film's title. The title Blade Runner actually has nothing to do with Philip K. Dick's original novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Its roots trace back to Alan E. Nourse's 1974 novel The Blade Runner, which depicted a dystopian future where medical care was tightly controlled, forcing underground doctors to operate illegally. In that story, Blade Runners were smugglers of surgical tools, a far cry from Ridley Scott's futuristic detectives. In 1979, writer William S. Burroughs adapted Nourse's work into a screenplay titled Blade Runner: A Movie. When Fancher and Scott were searching for a title for their adaptation, after discarding names like Android and Dangerous Days, they came across Burroughs' title. Scott loved its sharp, mysterious sound, believing it perfectly captured the danger and intrigue of a film about hunters in a neon-soaked city. The production eventually purchased the rights to the name from Burroughs for just a few $1,000s. 13. A cast member was a real snake handler. Joanna Cassidy, who played Zora Salome, was in fact an experienced snake handler. In the film, Zora is an exotic dancer and model who performs with a snake, and during her meeting with Deckard, she appears with a python draped around her neck. What many don't know is that the snake wasn't a movie prop, but Cassidy's real pet python named Darling. Because Darling was used to her, Cassidy appeared completely at ease during filming. However, she later recalled that Darling disliked the smoke and artificial fog on set, so she had to calm the snake gently between takes to keep it from panicking. Zora's death scene. Her desperate flight through the acid rain before being shot through a glass storefront remains one of the film's most striking moments. Yet in the 1982 version, audiences could clearly see that the person crashing through the glass wasn't Cassidy, but a stunt woman. Years later, for Blade Runner. The final cut. Ridley Scott invited Cassidy back to reshoot portions of the sequence digitally, replacing the stunt woman's face with Cassidy's own. The actress accepted with delight, joking, "I was thrilled to be called back, and even happier to find out I still fit into the costume." 12. The film was defeated at the box office. When Blade Runner premiered on June 25, 1982, Ridley Scott and the crew probably did not anticipate that their work would be instantly overshadowed by Steven Spielberg's E.T. the Extraterrestrial. While Blade Runner and John Carpenter's The Thing were released on the same day E.T. had premiered 2 weeks earlier and quickly became a global phenomenon. Spielberg's film captured audiences with warm emotions, faith in friendship, and childhood. Innocence, a stark contrast to Blade Runner's cold, dark, and pessimistic atmosphere. For several consecutive weeks, E.T. dominated the box office, leaving darker-toned films like Blade Runner and The Thing little chance to succeed. With a budget of approximately $28 million, Blade Runner earned just over $32 million in the North American market. While critics acknowledged its groundbreaking visual beauty and production design, many viewers at the time found the film slow, confusing, and lacking the easily accessible human emotion present in E.T. However, time has shown that commercial failure does not equate to artistic failure. When Blade Runner was re-released in director's cut and final cut versions, audiences and critics began to recognize it as a milestone in film history. Today, Blade Runner is not only considered one of the greatest science fiction films of all time, but also serves as an endless source of inspiration for generations of directors from Christopher Nolan to Denis Villeneuve. 11. Zora's transparent raincoat became iconic. For both regular movie fans and hardcore cosplay enthusiasts, Zora's image has become an unforgettable Blade Runner icon. What few know is that the legendary raincoat was added not for style, but to protect stunt performer Lee Pulford when she had to crash through glass during Zora's shooting scene. The glass wasn't real, but it wasn't completely safe either. Originally, in Hampton Fancher's script, Zora was supposed to die under a bus, a scene too dangerous and difficult to execute, so the crew had to find a safer yet dramatic alternative. That sequence became one of the most memorable action scenes in the film, but eagle-eyed fans may notice a mistake. The person running through the glass is not Joanna Cassidy. The reason is practical. Blade Runner was over budget and behind schedule, leaving no time to reshoot the scene with Cassidy. So the crew hurriedly dressed Lee Pulford in a wig that didn't resemble Cassidy's hair, put on the iconic raincoat, and had her crash through the glass in the artificial rain. 10. Harrison Ford kicked himself. Did you know that Priss's famous kick to Deckard's face was not actually performed by Daryl Hannah? Instead, the fateful kick was delivered by Gary Combs, the film's stunt coordinator and Harrison Ford's stunt double. In other words, Deckard literally kicked himself. Ridley Scott, a perfectionist, was not satisfied with the kick Daryl Hannah performed, so he asked Combs to wear Priss's outfit and redo the scene. He had only one condition: don't laugh when I get up. Of course, that promise did not last long. The story doesn't end there. While filming the scene of Priss tumbling through J.F. Sebastian's apartment, the crew initially hired a female gymnast to perform the dangerous flips. Ridley Scott's notorious habit of shooting multiple takes to achieve perfect angles led to the gymnast becoming nearly exhausted by midday, collapsing in the corner of the set. Gary Combs, the heart of the stunt team, had to urgently find a replacement, and the only option was a male gymnast. He was very strong and flexible, but short, muscular, and not resembling Daryl Hannah at all. 9. No CGI was used in the film. Because the film was made before the CGI era, all visual effects were created manually. Ridley Scott's team relied entirely on miniatures, matte paintings, and optical effects. The wide shots of Los Angeles in 2019, with bright lights, smoke rain, and flying spinners, were achieved using layered models combined with fiber optic lighting to create the illusion of depth and scale. Each miniature building was individually lit, producing a vivid, imaginary nightscape without any computer assistance. However, this work was not easy. Blade Runner faced budget difficulties, and the crew had to make use of all available resources. Some models and props were reused or borrowed from other films. Sources say that the ceiling inside the mothership in Close Encounters of the Third Kind was repurposed as the police station roof in Blade Runner, a prime example of reusing old materials to save costs. 8. The famous Bradbury Building. With its Victorian architecture, glass roof, cage elevators, and black iron spiral staircase, the Bradbury Building possesses a beauty that is both classical and surreal. In the film, it serves as the apartment of engineer J.F. Sebastian, where tense dialogues and confrontations between humans and replicants occur. To create a gloomy atmosphere, the crew covered the walls with artificial mist and soft neon lighting, transforming the once bright space into a decayed, dreamlike apartment complex. Blade Runner was not the first film to feature the Bradbury Building. For decades, it had been a familiar star of film noir. Bradbury had appeared in films such as DOA 1950, M 1951, and Chinatown 1974, serving as a backdrop for chase or confrontation scenes under dim light filtering through iron railings. The building's fame continued into the 21st century. In The Artist 2011, it was used again as a location, proving the enduring vitality of this 130-year-old architectural landmark. 7. The ending was borrowed from Kubrick's The Shining. Did you know that the happy ending in the original theatrical release was actually pieced together from unused footage of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining? After test screenings showed that audiences were indifferent to the ambiguous dark ending that Ridley Scott intended, Warner Brothers requested a softer conclusion. Unwilling to shoot more due to budget and time constraints, Scott contacted Kubrick to borrow aerial shots cut from the beginning of The Shining. These shots of Montana's spectacular landscapes were combined with scenes of Deckard and Rachel driving out of Los Angeles, accompanied by Deckard's voiceover, explaining that Rachel has no expiration date like other replicants. However, Ridley Scott was never satisfied with this ending, feeling that the forced happy ending and excessive voiceover diminished the film's philosophical weight and noir tone. 6. Rachel's appearance was inspired by a classic Hollywood star. The character Rachel, played by Sean Young, appears with a cold, elegant and sophisticated beauty that mesmerizes audiences. In the film, she is the assistant to Eldon Tyrell, head of the Tyrell Corporation, which manufactures replicants. When Deckard performs the Voight-Kampff test, he discovers that she too is a replicant. Interestingly, Rachel's appearance was modelled after legendary Hollywood actress Joan Crawford, as envisioned by Ridley Scott and his design team. From the sharp eyeliner to the perfectly sculpted updo, Rachel embodies a blend of the mysterious 1940s femme fatale and the melancholic aura of a dystopian future. Ridley Scott once said, he wanted Sean Young to look as if she had just stepped out of Mildred Pierce. The role had initially been considered for several other actresses, including Barbara Hershey, Nina Axelrod, and even Grace Jones. But only Scott believed Sean Young possessed that fragile yet proud quality reminiscent of Vivien Leigh, perfectly fitting his vision of Rachel. After the film's release, Rachel quickly became an icon of modern noir beauty. However, behind the scenes, Sean Young's working relationship with Harrison Ford was not entirely smooth. In a later interview, Young revealed that during the scene where Deckard prevents Rachel from leaving the apartment, pushing her against the wall, her frightened and pained reaction was genuine, as Ford had accidentally hurt her. The scene had to be reshot several times, leaving Young both physically and emotionally shaken. Nonetheless, she recalled that Ford later tried to lighten the atmosphere with jokes, helping her feel more at ease to complete the role. 5. Dustin Hoffman almost played Deckard. Before Harrison Ford became the iconic face of Rick Deckard, the role was originally tailored for Dustin Hoffman. In the early stages of the project, director Ridley Scott and producer Michael Dealey spent months negotiating with Hoffman. However, the actor repeatedly proposed his own creative ideas for the character ideas that differed significantly from Scott's and screenwriter Hampton Fancher's vision. After multiple meetings without reaching an agreement, Hoffman decided to withdraw from the project, officially leaving the role due to creative differences. His departure occurred relatively late in pre-production, forcing the team to quickly find a replacement before shooting began. At that time, Harrison Ford had just completed Raiders of the Lost Ark 1981 and was at the peak of his fame. Ridley Scott, after viewing some of Ford's scenes in Raiders, was impressed by his tough, introspective demeanour and decided to offer him the role of Deckard. Although Ford initially hesitated, he eventually agreed after reading the script and being intrigued by the theme of humanity in a futuristic world. However, the relationship between Ford and Ridley Scott during filming was far from smooth. Both later admitted that they had many disagreements over the character portrayal and the film's tone. Ford felt left out in a production heavily focused on design and atmosphere, while Scott believed that actors needed to trust the director's vision. Nevertheless, according to later interviews, both reconciled and expressed mutual respect. 4. Rutger Hauer was cast as Roy Batty without an audition. Rutger Hauer was chosen for the role of Roy Batty, even though he had never met Ridley Scott in person. Scott had seen Hauer's Dutch films such as Turkish Delight, Katie Tipple and Soldier of Orange, and was immediately struck by the actor's powerful yet enigmatic screen presence. Without a traditional audition, Scott decided Hauer was the perfect embodiment of a being who was both intelligent and dangerous, yet capable of deep emotion. When they finally met, Hauer showed up in a wildly eccentric outfit, pink satin pants, a white sweater with a fox design, and oversized green sunglasses. Ridley Scott was reportedly horrified by his appearance. It was the complete opposite of the stoic philosophical rebel he had imagined for Roy Batty. Yet within minutes of conversation, Hauer's confidence, wit, and magnetic energy convinced Scott that he had made the right choice. Were you impressed by Hauer's performance in the film? Share your thoughts below. 3. Harrison Ford refused to wear a hat. After finishing Raiders of the Lost Ark, Harrison Ford carried a lingering frustration over the now iconic fedora of Indiana Jones. That image had become so tied to him that when he joined Blade Runner a year later, Ford was determined to shed the adventurous archaeologist persona audiences adored. Ridley Scott, a fan of classic film noir, initially wanted Deckard to wear a detective-style hat reminiscent of Humphrey Bogart in The Maltese Falcon. But Ford firmly opposed the idea. He wanted Deckard to look more modern, grounded, and realistic. Just before filming began, Ford visited a barber and got a short contemporary haircut, one that made wearing any hat impossible. The decision forced Scott to abandon his original noir-inspired visual plan for the character. 2. Ford despised the voiceover narration. Early test screenings in Denver and Dallas for the first cut of Blade Runner were disastrous. Audiences were confused and frustrated, unable to follow the story. Under pressure from Warner Brothers, Ridley Scott reluctantly agreed to a solution adding voiceover narration to explain Deckard's thoughts and actions. However, the strongest opponent of this idea was Harrison Ford himself. He believed the narration undermined the subtlety and ambiguity Scott intended. According to Ford, he was contractually obligated to record the lines despite not believing in them. The dialogue was hastily written, clunky, overly expository, and devoid of rhythm or emotion. Ford described the recording sessions as a nightmare and was deeply disappointed to see the film burdened with what he called an unnecessary user manual. Rumour has it that Ford deliberately read the lines in a flat, lifeless tone in hopes the studio would realise how bad it sounded and remove it, though he later denied intentionally sabotaging it. He admitted, however, that he did the best he could with an impossible piece of writing. Do you prefer the version with or without the narration? 1. The film has 7 different versions. Interestingly, Blade Runner exists in 7 different cuts. The first, known as the work print, was screened in Denver and Dallas in 1982. It featured unfinished editing, minimal music, and notably no narration or happy ending. After disastrous test screenings, producers demanded revisions to make the film more accessible, resulting in the US theatrical version, which added Deckard's narration and a bright, optimistic ending using leftover footage from Kubrick's The Shining. The international version contained slightly more violence, while the TV version was heavily censored for broadcast standards. By 1992, as the film had gained cult status, Ridley Scott released the director's cut, which removed the narration and happy ending, adding instead the iconic unicorn dream, implying Deckard might be a replicant himself. Finally, in 2007, Scott gained full creative control and produced the final cut, the only version he officially endorses. It restored scenes of violence from the international version, improved visual effects, fixed continuity errors such as Jorah's death scene, and delivered a definitive cinematic experience. The 20 behind-the-scenes facts about Blade Runner reveal a production filled with passion, conflict, and creativity. From clashes between Ridley Scott and the crew to surprising casting choices like Dustin Hoffman almost playing Deckard and Rutger Hauer. Writing the immortal Tears in Rain speech just 30 minutes before filming, Every detail contributes to the film's legendary legacy. So what about you? Which fact fascinates you the most? Do you love Blade Runner for its neo-noir atmosphere, its haunting meditation on what it means to be human, or the lonely beauty of rain-soaked Los Angeles in 2019? Share your thoughts below, and if you enjoy stories like these, don't forget to subscribe for more behind-the-scenes film insights.